We are honored to host today's conversation and want to thank World War Zero for making Otterbein the first location for their nationwide tour. My name is Hannah Sturgeon, and I am a freshman here at Otterbein University, majoring in both political and environmental science with a minor in sustainability studies. I am also a part of the Cardinal Corps Leaders, a team of students who mobilize over 500 of our peers each year to volunteer in our local community. I co-lead Raise Your Voice, registering students to vote and increasing awareness on campus about key social issues facing our generation. We are working together on food justice issues at the Otterbein Community Garden, and we are reducing our carbon footprint through Planet Earth's recycling and energy reduction efforts. Together, we are building a green campus coalition to address climate change. Before we start today's town hall with Governor John Kasich, Secretary John Kerry, and Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, we have a few announcements. Please be sure to mute your phones. When the program starts, we very much encourage you to take a few photos and share them widely on social media using the hashtag #WorldWar0. But after the program begins, please put your phones away. Please refrain from any video recording or flash photography at any time. Out of consideration for each other and in the interest of everyone's health, we ask that you cover your mouth and nose if you need to cough and sneeze. As you probably noticed when you arrived, we have plenty of hand sanitizer at the entryways, or you could use the restrooms found downstairs. Thank you for coming to today's Climate Conversations Town Hall. We are so glad to have you here. Now please rise as I introduce Alec Arnett, a sophomore vocal performance major, here to sing our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting through air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Welcome to Otterbein University. My name is John Comerford, and I have the honor of being the president of Otterbein University, and we're thrilled to see this great crowd out here today for this important event. This really says something, because let's face it, it is Sunday afternoon, it is gorgeous outside, and you are in here with us. We are really honored by that, and that actually says that you all understand what an important topic this really is, that you understand it's going to take every single one of us to address the climate change crisis, and so we appreciate your commitment here today. Now, Otterbein is certainly not new to being in the middle of the issues of the day. Going back to our founding, we were in the middle of the issue of abolition, equal rights for women, civil rights. We even toyed with the temperance movement for a little while. So today's challenges are certainly no different. We need people to stand up and do the right thing before it is popular, and that's what we're used to doing here at Otterbein. In fact, one of the great things about working here is that I get to work with students every single day. Our students are engaged, optimistic, active, community-oriented. Do not believe what you read about this generation of students and young people. They are making our campus better every day, and they are making our wider community better every day. And one of the things that we have to do right at a place like Otterbein, and I hope they do this at every college and university, is teach the importance of interconnectedness. That none of us is a silo. All that we do impacts those around us. And to solve big problems, yes, we need governments and world organizations and nonprofits, but we need every individual to come together to make those things happen. And so I hope they're getting that lesson. If I could summarize our mission statement very briefly, it would be to change the world one student at a time. Events like today's are part of how we do that. We have many students, faculty, and staff in the audience today, and so they will already know this, but for the rest of you, you may not realize that we have a relatively recent addition to the Otterbein family who goes by the name John Kasich. And we've been very honored to have him on campus. He meets with groups of students, he goes to classes to help teach, he walks into random meetings to see if he can help out. He's a lot of fun to have around. But there is a nice side benefit to having John Kasich on campus. He has a lot of very cool friends. About a month ago, we had Chris Evans of Captain America fame on campus, thanks to Governor Kasich, and today we are very honored to have on our campus Secretary John Kerry, Erika Alexander, and of course, the Terminator. I considered using my Arnold voice, but he's right backstage right now, and I didn't think that would be a great idea. We are grateful to Secretary Kerry, Governor Schwarzenegger, and Erika for being here, but we're especially grateful to Governor Kasich for making this happen on our campus today. At this point, I am very pleased to introduce Erika Alexander. Now, I grew up watching her on The Cosby Show. It was the one show our whole family enjoyed together. But you may know her from Living Single and the recent hit film Get Out. But Erika is also a prominent activist. She was Hillary Clinton's most traveled surrogate, and through her production company, Color Farm Media, she recently produced Good Trouble, a documentary about civil rights icon and Congressman John Lewis. She also was an original enlistee for World War II. Please give a warm Otterbein welcome to Erika.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful. This is a great crowd. So nice to have you. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. My name is Erika Alexander, and I'm really proud to have been enlisted in World War II. This is a fantastic issue about a very important crisis. And I'm from Arizona originally, and I've been to Philadelphia and also New York, and now I live in Los Angeles. I've seen personally how in each one of these locations, the climate issue has been affected and has changed our daily way of life. But right now, it's time to get this bad boy started. So please give a warm Ohio welcome to Secretary John Kerry, former Governor of California, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's coming. There he is. And your former governor here in Ohio, John Kasich. He likes to make a big show off of it. Here he comes. Got a lot of Johns in this room. All right. All right. We are going to jump right into this discussion, but first I'd like to let you know at home, watching our live stream, that we will be answering your questions. And for those of you here at Otterbein University, we'd like you to line up behind the microphone if you want to ask a question. We want to get as many questions in as possible. And we ask that you make your questions direct and quick so we can hear from more of you gathered here today about the climate crisis. Let's jump into this.
Do it.
Let's do it. I'm going to ask each of you, you climate warriors, there's a lot of fine gentlemen up here, to briefly answer this question. We've all heard what the scientists are telling us. We know that there's no real debate on the science. So what has stopped policymakers from taking the kind of action that needs to be taken? Secretary Kerry, you're up first.
Well, if I can stand up for a minute. First of all, thank you for the privilege of being here at the university. Mr. President, we appreciate it very, very much. And I can't thank Governor Kasich and Governor Schwarzenegger, the Terminator. He's going to terminate carbon, folks. He's making that. I really appreciate it. Neither of them They got a lot of things on their plate, but they are both activists in the best manner, and I'm really thrilled to be joining them in this effort of World War Zero, and I want to talk about it for a minute. But before I do, I want to ask you a question in response to Erika's question. How many of you here believe that the science is certain, that it's been proven and the facts are there? We know that human beings are contributing most significantly to the rise of the loops that are showing us the bad things that are happening. How many believe that that science is settled at this point in time? Raise your hands. Almost every hand in the place, not every hand, but almost every hand here. Well, you're correct. The science is settled. But now let me ask you an equally important question. How many of you feel that government, business, and individuals in the world, as well as here in America, are doing all the things that we need to do in order to beat this crisis? How many believe that? Okay, for those of you not here, not one hand went up. And that's why we have created World War Zero. World, because the whole world has to come to the table to be part of this solution. War, because in fact, deniers and delayers and procrastinators and distorters have in fact declared a war on science, on facts, on evidence. And the result is that we are now faced with scientific certainty of a rising temperature on the planet, unlike anything we have yet even experienced, and lesser time to be able to deal with it because the scientists have told us 2 years ago you have 12 years to avoid the worst consequences. Now it's 2 years already gone, and during those 2 years, not one country in the world is getting the job done. I had the privilege of leading the negotiations on the Paris Agreement for the United States. We brought 196 countries together. They all decided simultaneously we're going to move in the same direction. And for the first 2 years, more money went into alternative, renewable, sustainable energy than into fossil fuels. First time ever. But notwithstanding that, my friends, the reason we're here in Ohio, and we're going to go to other states all across the country, is to help you to be able to go to your neighbors and begin to build the movement necessary to create accountability here. Why? Because when we left Paris, we knew we were not holding the Earth's temperature to 2 degrees centigrade rise. We didn't fake it. We just weren't able to get a mandatory agreement, partly because of our own United States Senate that won't join agreements with other countries because they say it's a loss of sovereignty. So here we are, stuck. And what we did was take every country designing its own plan and saying, here's where we're going to go, in this direction. And as I said, for 2 years we did. But then, unfortunately, only the United States of America pulled out of this agreement. No other president of another country took their country out of this agreement. And when that happened, reluctant partners that we struggled to bring to the table, Australia, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, India, began to say, oh, the United States isn't going to do anything. Why? We don't have to do that much. And so guess what, my friends? Sadly, in America, emissions are going up this year. In China, they're going up. In India, they're going up. In Europe, they're going up. And this is becoming more of an emergency for the world. We're currently, if we did everything we set out to do in Paris, we still will have a warming to 3.7 degrees centigrade. But we're not doing everything we said we'd do in Paris. We're actually headed to 4.1 to 4.5 degrees. And any scientist in the world will tell you that's catastrophe. They'll tell you that's the difference between civilization and chaos in the future, when we have refugees in countries that can't survive. Last summer, it was 125 degrees in Pakistan, and people were just dying from the heat because the human body doesn't exist in that capacity. We're going to have food disruptions. We're going to have water disruptions. The President of France went to a sort of funeral service for the glaciers of Mont Blanc. I went to Greenland and Iceland and to Antarctica, and we saw the marks of where all the retreated ice is, and you see, massive amounts flowing out to the sea to melt and the sea level rise. Here's why we're here. I'll end very quickly. This is what this is about. We have not had a fair conversation about this in our country. We barely had any, really. Now we have 16-year-old kids striking in schools telling us, you adults are not behaving like adults. You're not getting the job done, and they're right. And tragically, most of those young kids are not going to be able to vote before it's too late to make the difference we need to make. But what you haven't been told is, and this is the discussion we need to have in America, this is the greatest economic opportunity we've ever had. It's an opportunity to build out new infrastructure in our country, to build a new grid for our energy, to take clean energy from one part of the country and send it to the other, to use artificial intelligence and quantum computing and put together a future that is different than people think. The fastest growing job in America today is solar power technician. Second fastest growing job, wind turbine power technician. So moving to electric vehicles, moving our transportation, moving how we provide sources of heat and energy to our homes, all of it is an opportunity for what America does best. Discover the future, define the future, innovate the future. And the fact is that, we're the country that went to the moon. We're the country that invented the internet. We're the country that knows how to do this. We're not being asked to be that country and deal with this challenge. So today, we look forward to helping everybody here, I hope, to leave here making a choice to do the biggest thing that we can do. Hold political people and so-called leaders accountable. And how do you hold them accountable? You make sure you make our democracy work. World War Zero is going to have, hopefully, more than 10 million conversations with our fellow Americans, many of them digital, through Facebook, through Snapchat, through Instagram, and every way we can. We're going to go out personally, we're going to talk to people, and we're going to make every effort for people to see that you have better health if the air is cleaner. You have less cancer. Children aren't hospitalized in the summer because of environmentally induced asthma, which you spend $55 billion a year to deal with. So there are better choices, and most importantly, we have admirals and generals and former Republican secretaries of defense and others who've come to this table of World War Zero because they know that this is a national security challenge unlike anything we've ever seen. I hope we can talk about some of that today. So the solution to this, my friends, is you. It's energy policy. There is a solution, and we still have time to win, but we won't do it unless we hold people in public office accountable to make the changes and take advantage of the opportunities we need. Thank you. So,
Very nice.
Very good, John.
Well, now we know when we ask Secretary Kerry a question, he's going to give us a lecture. We'll be glad we got that one. Because to go back, to
that's
go
just
forward,
the opening.
yeah, we'll
Just the opening. I've got Arnold here. You think I'm going to get out of place, folks?
I know, that's right. But to go forward, we need to go a little back and ask the question, really, what has stopped? This is how this is going to go. Never can be too careful.
You should have seen us backstage. We were having so much fun, we almost didn't come out.
What stopped policymakers from taking the kind of action that needs to be taken? Governor Kasich, speak on that.
Well, it's interesting. In December, I made a phone call to George Shultz. He used to be the former Secretary of State. He's 99 years old, going on about 50. And I said to him, because he is the one that came up with the whole idea of carbon trading. And I said, how did you get involved with this? It's really interesting because Republicans were at the foundation of this concern about the environment. I mean, this is hard to, honestly. And he said, well, Ronald Reagan called me in the Oval Office, and he says, he says, President Reagan says, well, I see we might be losing the ozone, George. And he said, you know, I don't know whether it's true or not, but we certainly need an insurance policy in case it's happening. And, you know, it was very interesting to think about it from the standpoint of we have to do things. And I've called a few of my friends to find out, Republican friends, what's happened. He said, well, we want to do it slower, they want to do it faster. Look, folks, what's happening in our country today is the conversations are just not happening. I mean, I was involved in so many negotiations in Washington with Democrats in the White House, and we at least had conversations. Now, I'm a believer that almost all policy change comes from the bottom up, whether it's the civil rights movement. Politicians didn't want to pay any attention to it. Whether it was women's suffrage, ma'am, you don't think that those guys wanted to give you power, do you? It took how long to get women's suffrage? And African Americans, Erika, it had to fight another 50 years to get the kind of suffrage. There were so many African American women who were heroes, the things that they've done. Arnold and I've been friends for a very long time. Arnold is a very unique political leader because he leads from the top down. I like to think that's what I did as governor, and it rankled some people. But when you see a problem, you try to go and fix it. But that's very unusual in politics because most things happen from the bottom up. When John Kerry called me and talked to me about this, he said, look, John, we're not going to get into all the prescriptions right now. What we're going to get into is a conversation that what is happening on this planet is a problem and that we need to all come together, have a dialogue. But folks, the idea that we might have, what would you say, 10 million conversations, this is how it's going to change. It is going to change when you will not tolerate anymore politicians that want to put their heads in the sand. You see, they're afraid. You know, they will become afraid to go to a town hall meeting where they don't have an answer for this. Now, how did we get here in a nutshell? You know, so people are going to ask you, well, what is the problem? My friends, some of my great friends, you know, have an argument with me. Well, you know, things change. Over centuries, the temperature goes up, it goes down and all. But let me tell you in a simple way what is happening. This carbon that gets generated from fossil fuel and so many other things does not escape the atmosphere. It creates a blanket. And methane, which is even much more dangerous than carbon and much more exponential in terms of creating this blanket, escapes into the atmosphere and buffers the carbon that's already there. It's one of the reasons why when we did fracking in Ohio, in my administration, we went after carbon. We had tougher rules on carbon, Arnold and John, than the federal government did, because we said this methane the methane is very, very serious. And when you drill, you have to make sure you can capture it. Well, as this carbon builds up and cannot escape our atmosphere, and as the methane coats that carbon, we have a blanket. And we wonder, so the sun shines through and brings us energy. And we just see these storms in Nashville, these horrible tornadoes that went through there. Why are they all so violent now? Well, they're violent because the heat that is generated by the sun into where we live can't get out. There's nowhere to go. So it's fueling fires. It's fueling the ferocity of these storms. And we see what's happening to the addition of melting that is happening with our glaciers. You know, my wife and I have always marveled over the last 15 years, you go to Glacier Park, there aren't any glaciers there anymore, or the ones that are there are tiny. So what we have to do is to figure out, number one, how to stop building that blanket and allow the energy that is generated here to escape. And to put ourselves in a position where we can begin to capture the carbon that is up there and the methane that's up there and to have a much more productive environment here. So when you heat everything and the heat can't get out, it causes all kinds of troubles. That, in a nutshell, is what is going on. And do we have to have a revolution? No, but I don't think we can just sit around and wait. You know, we can't just wait. It's like, oh, okay, we got a $23 trillion debt. Well, we can wait. Okay, we can't wait on that. We can't wait on this. but you have to be heard. And are there reasonable things that we can do? Of course. Of course there are things we can do to develop these renewable energies. I've got a Tesla parked right out here. I got it yesterday, so I could say that. No, I've had it for a while. But there are things that we can do. We can shift more to solar. We can get more wind. We can begin to take carbon out of the coal that gets burned. I mean, there's so many things that we can do that are not revolutionary, but things that people can do in a reasonable way, and the development of battery technology and the storage of solar and wind. And so these are the kinds of things that we're talking about. We're not talking about some crazy thing out here, but we know that we have to speed it up. And America has to lead. I mean, can you imagine that America is not at the table? I mean, in my lifetime, I've never seen an America that wasn't at the table for good. And I'll tell you this, I love that Greta Thunberg. A young girl, think about this for a second. A young girl shows up outside the parliament holding a sign and goes on strike. She's 15 years old. She's gotten older now. I think she's 16 now. And she inspired a young people's revolution all across the planet because she said, I can make a difference. You know what the question is for all of you? Are you and you and you, are you willing to make a difference and make it uncomfortable for people who are not putting this planet first, because our whole life is about providing a better future for our children, for our grandchildren, and for our great-grandchildren. And that's why we're here. And I've got to tell you, it's so great to work with John Kerry, and it's so great to work with Arnold. And we're not going to stop this. We're going to do this across our country, and we're going to win. But we're going to win because we have you. That's why we're going to win. So, thank you, Erika, for giving me an opportunity to speak.
Thank you. This question is for Governor Schwarzenegger. As you talk to people across the country who may not yet be convinced that we need a major national mobilization effort to address the climate crisis, what messages do you find resonate the best? And this is important because you are like a killer combo of entertainment and policymaker, governor. I live in California. I know the work you've done. I'm very proud to be from California and be in a place where your leadership made a difference. What messages did you use there to change things, and how do you think those messages could resonate or break through?
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you
Yes,
for
sir.
being here today and moderating this. Second of all, I want to say thank you to my friends here on stage, because I think that John did something very smart, and that is when he created this organization, he wanted to make sure that Democrats and Republicans and declined to state and independents, everyone join into this organization. And this is exactly why I think the world of him. Because one thing that we know for sure, that nothing gets done if both parties don't work together. This is just the way it is, and this is why we have to make an effort to not villainize one party or the other about whatever subject it is. We got to bring them together, and that's what we have done in California. We were able to do that because Democrats and Republicans worked together. And I think that one of the most important things that we did was we changed the message. Because we hear so much about, when you talk to environmentalists or when you listen to environmental speeches, you hear so much about, global climate change. You hear about the sea waters rising. You hear about the glaciers melting. You hear about, that the North Pole is in a disastrous situation, and all of this kind of thing, that the temperatures are going to change in 20 years from now, and all this kind of stuff. Our brain is not wired for what's going to happen 10 years from now, 5 years from now, or 20 years from now. It's wired at what is happening today. And so what we did was, when we saw that our message wasn't really getting through, we changed the messaging and we said, 7 million people are dying every year because of pollution. In America alone, 200,000 people die every year because of pollution. And we told them about the amount of kids that are getting asthma at the age of 3 or 4 already, and they're in danger. And so that really rattled the cage. And it turned around the poll numbers in California. I remember then when there was Proposition 23, where the oil and the coal companies from out of state came in and they wanted to change all of our environmental laws and wanted to suspend them. And we fought back. And we fought back with that message. And they tried to scare people that you're going to lose jobs and the economy is going to go down if you switch and you go into this green kind of future and all this. And then we had the message about so many people die and kids are getting affected with asthma and all this stuff. And that changed the poll numbers. They were ahead in the polls, but within the last month, when we had that message out there, it changed it and we beat them. With 60% of the points, we won and defeated Proposition 23 and defeated the oil companies and the coal companies in California so they couldn't move forward and suspend all of our environmental laws. So that was the message. It's the message about what is happening today rather than what will be happening tomorrow. And I think that the environmental community is doing a huge disservice by always talking about all these measurements and all the amount of tonnage and millions of tons of greenhouse gases that are out there and all this. It all sounds good, but people cannot comprehend what these measurements mean. As much as when you told someone this guy just lifted 550 pounds in a clean and jerk, they didn't understand how much weight is that really. But when you say this is an equivalent of a huge professional refrigerator, then they said, oh my God, someone can lift that? That's really amazing. So you got to put it in human terms so it doesn't just go over our heads. And they use language that is to impress each other rather than to go and to tell you what to do. As a matter of fact, most of the environmental conferences that I went to didn't even tell the people what they need to do. They didn't even need to tell them the simple things. Say, hey, what you can do is look at the label when you buy a bit of clothing and see where it's made. Because if it's made overseas, if it is from Europe or from Asia, wherever it comes from, you are contributing to global climate change. Because the ships are shipping this stuff over, and the 15 biggest ships, cargo ships in the world, are bigger polluters than all of the cars combined. So you are contributing, so think about when you look at the label, maybe you have to pay a little bit more when it's made in America, but you are then becoming part of the environmental crusade rather than going and becoming part of the problem. If you want to become part of the solution, that's what it's about. So just go and buy more things that are made in America or in this area here, Canada, Mexico, America, whatever it is. I'm not here to now talk about protecting jobs, I'm talking about just about protecting the environment, but get things that are not made overseas. So that's number one. Number two, when you go out and you want to get a car, yes, you should go and look at an electric car or a hydrogen-fueled car, because we want to always mention both because we are not trying to pick winners. So, but the key thing is that's the power that you have, or the way you deal at home with your electricity, your electric bill. When you leave the home, the lights are out, and you have maybe smart metering or something like that, where you can go with your iPhone and you say, I'm going to turn off everything in my house, now air condition, heaters, or whatever it is. I turn it off, and an hour before I go home, I turn it on again on my iPad or my iPhone or whatever phone that you have. So those are kind of things that we can do on a daily basis or in our lives where we can really contribute to be part of that crusade, that environmental crusade that we are talking about. So we in California have been very successful because our messaging was different rather than just talking about the rising sea levels and all this stuff that most people cannot relate to. We have to talk about things that people can relate to. And I think a perfect example is right now with the coronavirus. You see how everyone is jumping into action? Because it's dangerous. We don't know what's going to come. So it is good to be cautious. That we wash our hands all the time, that we don't touch each other, that we wipe down our phone and all. We're doing all of those things because we want to become part of the solution. But that's what we want to see also with the environmental crusade. We want you to become part of the solution and to do everything that you can in order to not contribute to the greenhouse gases. We're not going to go and stop greenhouse gases from one day to the next. But that's not what we're talking about. But just reducing what we're putting out there, and then I think we can save our world.
Now, this question is from online, and there were over 400 questions submitted. This is Grant from New Jersey, and he asked, as a young Republican deeply concerned about the climate crisis, how can we get people in my party to both acknowledge the science on the issue and enact common sense bipartisan solutions to protect the planet? I guess he's looking for a Republican whisperer. Who wants to answer that?
Well, it's not me.
You know, I want to just say something. You know, this whole thing about Republican and Democrat, I have people come up to me, I'm a Democrat and I love you, okay? Keep them coming. But you know what I tell them? You're an American. This whole thing about party, I'm so tired of party, okay? But when I was a young man, you know, I ran for the legislature and I won. And I found myself with people that were significantly older. And it provided such a great opportunity for me to change the party. And now there's a great opportunity for this young person that's over in New Jersey to start organizing. If you want to be a Republican, fine, start organizing. The fact that I'm a Republican and I'm for the environment, and you start getting people together and you start building a movement inside of the party. And frankly, what we all ought to do, okay, we can have our allegiances, they're Republicans or Democrats, but let's not forget the most important thing is that we're all in the same rowboat. And we can't just be one side rows this way and the other one rows the other. We don't go anywhere. So for this young person, and one of my daughters, you know, she's very upset about the party and where it's going. And I said to her, I said, Reese, you can remake the party. You can be a leader in the party. I hope that'll convince her. We'll have to see. But that's kind of the way I look at it. So, you know, it's kind of cool to be on the outs, isn't it, Arnold? Kind of cool to lead a vanguard movement to bring about change in any organization. And that's what I would tell that young man.
Yeah, I happen to agree with John because we agree on a lot of things, but that's one of them, because we don't see it as a political issue. And as long as you go into that debate, you will please the parties, because that's the business of the parties, that we are better. This is our issue. What the hell are they talking about? This is our issue. It's not a party issue at all, because there is no Democratic air or Republican air. There's only, we all breathe the same air. There's no Democratic water or Republican water. We all drink the same water. So don't fall for those tricks. It's not a political issue. We all drink the same water, and don't fall for those political tricks, because that's what they want you to do, is to fight. But this is not something to fight over. This is something to fight for. To fight for a clean environment, for a green energy future. And this is why when people say to you, he says, what do you think about what the Republicans say? I say, I'm not even getting into a party discussion, because we have had Ronald Reagan create the Air Resources Board in California, the most important organization, so that we could do the things that we did. When I was governor, we said we're going to reduce greenhouse gases by 25%, and because of the Air Resources Board, we were able to go and reduce the greenhouse gases by 25%. And because of the Air Resources Board, when we said we're going to go and create more than 50% renewables and get it from 21% to 50%, it was the Air Resources Board that Ronald Reagan created to go and accomplish those kind of goals. So we have accomplished all of those goals. We are the real deal in California. We have done a tremendous job with our environmental messaging, and also with what we have accomplished in all of those things. But we never got that political about it. We always made it a people's issue. That is the important thing, and this is why, I mean, Ronald Reagan did this Air Resources Board. President Nixon created the EPA in Washington. I mean, we heard earlier about Ronald Reagan, how he fought for getting rid of the ozone layer and all this stuff, and also President Bush after that, senior. So there's all kinds of Republicans. Teddy Roosevelt that put more land aside for the public and all of those things. So we can't go and get political. There will be always Republicans that will be against it. There will be Democrats that are maybe for it, or by making moves that are all bad and are against it. So, I mean, let's forget about it. We got to come together We got to come together, otherwise America cannot move forward with any of those issues. It doesn't matter if it's environmental issues. I mean, look at what's going on in the last 20 years. The environmental issues, we didn't move forward. With an energy policy, we didn't move forward. With immigration reform, we didn't move forward. Building infrastructure, we didn't move forward. Having a decent healthcare system, we didn't move forward, even though they talk about Obamacare, but it's still not there yet. But so there's all of these failures that those politicians can't get together and do those things. I mean, think about it now for a second, that when you look at this Democratic lineup of presidential candidates, the way it was in the beginning, now everyone is dropping out because it's getting to that point now where you weed out, who is good and who is not, or whatever, who is in and who is out. But the bottom line is, none of those guys that won a stage ever passed any policy that had to do with reducing greenhouse gases. Tell me one single candidate that was standing up there that actually passed in his state or nationally to reduce the greenhouse gases and set a specific goal and accomplish that goal. None of them. But they all talk the big game. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican. Let's all work together, and then we can get it done. That is the bottom line.
Can I? Okay.
And please, John, don't touch my glass anymore.
Well, I thought you meant what you said, that we all drink from the same glass. Folks, let me, as the guy sandwiched in between the two Republicans here, let me, if I can, just add a quick observation. Historically, we've had a great debate in America between conservative and liberal, and there's very legitimate argument and ideology for being conservative or liberal, and the great traditions of our liberal democracy. There's nothing conservative about what is happening now with this administration. It's not conservatism. True conservatism would actually be conserving. It would actually be working to get ahead of this, implementing a precautionary principle. And the recent history of the Republican Party is something that some Republicans could brag about. Because George Herbert Walker Bush, when we all went to Rio in 1992 for the first World Summit on climate, that's when the first UN efforts came into play. And it's both good and it should scare you a little bit, because that's back in 1992. And obviously we're now 2020, and we haven't really come together in a way that everybody knows we're going to get to our goal. That's the problem. But George Herbert Walker Bush, Bill Riley, his EPA director then, worked really actively and conscientiously to get an agreement from the global community, and we got one. It was voluntary, that's the problem. And nobody really went home and did the voluntary things. So we have a long journey here of people trying to do this kind of thing. But what has happened in the last year is there's been an assault on reason, accompanied by an assault of the lack of actually legitimate reason that has produced a rewriting of laws. The things that Arnold said he fought in California are in fact happening by executive order in Washington now. We're putting more coal sludge into lakes and streams. Did any of you here ask for that to happen? Is there a constituency for more coal sludge in streams and water? We're now seeing the president fighting with California. We're seeing, it's one of the best words in the American language today, guys. Arnold has revolutionized the dictionary. It's spelled with a K, K-A-A. But seriously, the fact is that we're now seeing a fight between Californian standards for automobiles, which Arnold and others helped to accelerate, and an effort which nobody's really asked for, including the auto industry, to get rid of the tailpipe standards. And just last year, the Smart Grid Federal Advisory Committee, which brought the best experts in America together to figure out how do we actually create a grid in the United States of America. Do you know that in 2020, America doesn't really have a grid? We have an East Coast grid, we have a West Coast grid, we have a line across the top from Chicago to the Dakotas, we have Texas has its own grid, but there's a huge hole in the middle of our country, and we can't take clean power, wind power, or hydro or something, and send it to all the parts of the country so you begin to address the imbalances in the availability of energy, which actually solves a huge problem for businesses. If businesses will know they never have to shut their doors or slow production because it's limited to where the sun shines or the wind blows, but they have storage or they have the capacity to draw from some other part of the country, we're solving the problem. This is why I say to you, this is technologically all available and feasible. I went to MIT last week to see a new model that shows you all your options of what you can do. It shows you the current trend line of coal, of oil, of gas, of renewable, of nuclear, and all the lines are there, and then it shows you the current line of temperature increase. And then it asks you, what would you like to do? Whether you say, okay, I want to put in place electric cars with a highly accelerated incentive, and you put it in, and the computer shows the lines move. You see how much you can lower the temperature, what goes down. Then you see, oh my God, that's not enough. We have to do more. So then it says, well, what if you do energy efficiency on buildings? And you suddenly put in retrofitting buildings. You'd be amazed. That's the low-hanging fruit, folks. You can really reduce temperature and reduce waste and energy. Then you still have some distance to go. So what do? Well, George Shultz, former Republican Secretary of State and Secretary of the Treasury, Reagan, and Jim Baker. Jim Baker was Secretary of Treasury and later became Secretary of State, but both of them are working today on a carbon tax. They both believe we should have a carbon tax and proceeds from it go back to the citizens, but that will start to change the equation between where. So we should be marrying these kinds of efforts, folks. That's conservatism. They're both conservatives. They are respected conservatives. And they would come to you and say, we can solve the problem, but here are some of the choices we have to implement. So I just say the Republican Party, to that young fellow from New Jersey, the Republican Party has a long history of being a real leader on environment. And we need to see it come back together with others. And as both of my friends have said, without caring about the labels of Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, this is an American challenge, it's a global challenge, and we all have to be part of it. And that's why it's World War Zero.
Yeah, Erika, let me just add one other thing. I was talking to a former Republican congressman the other day.
Excuse me, Governor, I just want to tell, if you can start lining up for the audience questions.
You know, we're going to probably have to go a little longer than what we planned here because there's so much to say. But I was talking to a Republican member, and I said, what's the problem with Republicans in the environment? He said, John, no matter what we offer, the Democrats say it's not enough. Now, let me just suggest this. There's that old song, you remember it, Respect, R-E-S-P-E-C-T. What we're missing in this debate, I believe, John, is, yeah, there are Republicans who are deniers, but there are Democrats who, if you don't agree with them, they demonize you and call you names. This has got to stop. In other words, this solution is going to come from the middle out. It's not going to come from the extremes in. So both parties, we have to police both of our parties. I vetoed a repeal of renewable standards here, which made no sense, and sometimes you have to take action, and we're all willing to take action. But at the end, we got to calm the troops so that when I'm a hard left Democrat and I want to belittle a Republican, it's not going to work. And the same way that a Republican trying to belittle a Democrat, it isn't going to work. And we have to police that because we're all entitled to our own opinion. And you want to get this done? We got to have to be enforcers against the extremes in both of our parties to be able to move forward.
We'll take some questions from the audience, and please keep your comments or your questions to the issue of climate.
I'll try to keep it short. First of all, thank you for having the opportunity to have you up there and to be able to ask you a question. I think there are at least one or two people up there that should consider running for president, perhaps again, because I appreciate the united message that I'm hearing. I'm an engineer, I'm a pilot, I've flown for over 40 years, and 40 years ago when I'd fly, you could see clear skies any day. Now, any day you fly, on the best day after a rainstorm, there's going to be haze. So there is no question that humans are impacting the environment. That said, I have an interest in, I'm just going to broach the subject, nuclear power. Nuclear has been around for 40 years, and there are studies, there's a Forbes article, that says that solar results in 440 deaths per trillion kilowatt hours. Solar, wind, 150. Hydro, 5. Nuclear, 0.1 deaths per trillion kilowatt hours generated. And so my question is, we have a solution today. It's been around for 40 years. It's proven. It has efficacy. It could solve the problem now, but we can't get people to come together to at least even consider it. One of the things I liked about President Obama, he had an all-of-the-above strategy on attacking this problem. So what can we do to address this now and then build towards new technologies like the storage and the grid that, John, you mentioned that we need to have? So that's my question.
Thank you.
You dealt with it in California. I'm happy to, I want to say something about it afterwards, but do you want to say something about California?
I just want to say, before I go there, just to make sure that everyone understands that I am so appreciative that we have this event here at the university and that so many of the students showed up, because this is their future. We're talking about their future, and this is why it's so important that the students show up, because I am a big, big enemy of complainers. I hate complainers because I want the complainers to get up, do not just complain when they hear something on the news or they read something in the paper and then just complain, but I want them to get up and do something about it. And I think that John had talked about it, and as a matter of fact, both of them have talked about that we should go up and do something about it. And I think your students have the responsibility. That's what we teach them at the Schwarzenegger Institute at USC in California. We teach the students to get up and to do something about it, to write up a report and to figure out how they can move forward rather than just to talk about it. Because you can be complaining about it from here to eternity. It's not going to solve the problem. But if you rise up and do something about it, just like Kasich was saying earlier, when he said about the suffrage movement or the civil rights movement or the independence movement in India or the anti-apartheid movement, none of those problems were solved in the capital. They were all solved by people. So we are relying on you. This is the people power. This is the grassroots power. You have the power to do something about it. So this is why it is important to go in that direction. Number two, I want to just say with nuclear power, I always have said that I'm not against nuclear power, that I'm for it in a limited way and in a safe way, because we have, as you have said already, the amount of death just in the coal industry. We have seen, over 8,000 deaths, and then in the nuclear power we've seen a little bit over 4,000 deaths. So if it goes according to death, we should have shut down the coal industry a long time ago, according to that. But we have to think reasonable here. And the reasonable really is that we go and copy California. We in California have reduced 25% of our greenhouse gases, and we did it effectively, and at the same time have improved our economy. Think about it, in California we have the strictest environmental laws, and at the same time we have economic growth, GDP growth of 3.6% average, and the United States has 2.2 to 2.5% growth. So all we have to do is, if the United States just copies what we are doing in California, we will have that kind of a GDP growth, and we will have that kind of a job growth, and we will go in the green direction and solve this problem once and for all. So forget about the Green New Deal and this New Deal and that New Deal. This is the real deal I'm talking about here, the California deal. Let's copy what California has done.
If I can just add quickly to that, because it's a very key question, and there are a lot of people still asking it. Currently, the current generation of nuclear plants are not competitive economically. And many people, because of Fukushima in Japan and Chernobyl, have sort of gone, oh my God, you know, this is out of control and we don't want anything to do with it. That generation of plants, first of all, there are very clear reasons of design and otherwise why they've had problems. And secondly, it's kind of dumb to build a nuclear plant where you know there are tsunamis and you're building on an earthquake fault. So there are ways to come at these things really much more thoughtfully, number one. Number two, fourth generation modular nuclear plants should be, I think, very much in contention. When I was negotiating, I led the negotiations in the Senate for a climate bill back in 2009 when President Obama first came in, and the House had passed one. And we had big oil, Chevron, Shell, ExxonMobil, they were all there at the table. We had the faith-based community of America at the table. We had the environment community at the table. We had the electrical power people at the table, and we had nuclear power at the table. And environmentalists agreed and signed off to the idea of the US government building 10 demonstration next-generation nuclear plants to get the pipeline of parts and supplies going, because today we don't have a pipeline. They're building a big nuclear plant down in the south, in Georgia, South Carolina. It's billions of dollars overrun, billions. And the reason is it's a one-off. Everything they build, every part that goes into it is the first time built. And so they're trying to figure it out. The economics of that don't work very well. But the next generation, I am told by professors, experts at various universities in America, that the design checks out and that you will deal with the problem of core melt, that you wouldn't have the same challenge in terms of ability technologically to shut down, and it deals with the problem of waste. Now, the rate we're going, folks, I worry enough that I am one of the all of the above school. I think we have to have it there as a conceivable option if we were to do just the fourth generation build out to create the supply chain, see what happens, but also see where the market goes. Now, why do I say that? I say see where the market goes because when you use this model, this MIT model, and I plugged in nuclear, what happens very strangely is your renewable line goes up. Renewables become less funded and chosen if nuclear is going into effect. It stands to logic. It's zero emissions. So people say to themselves, well, if I can get zero emissions and we build a nuclear, it's got a longer life, I'm going to go for that. So you have to sort of balance this out. We don't know yet whether you can create public acceptance of this. Politically, it's a killer right now. Nobody's going to come into a community and say, yeah, we want the nuclear plant. But I think still you need to put it on the table. It would be good for us to explore the fourth generation, and hopefully renewables take off so significantly that it's not necessary. And as I said, if someone, some next Sergey Brin or Bill Gates or whoever your role model is, if the next person who comes along who furthers battery storage significantly or some other form of storage so that we can get electricity stored for X number of days, 20, 25, 30 days, then you will have no problem in building out more solar and everything else, and we'll have a virtuous grid because we have the ability to provide for energy at all times. That's the key. It's doable, innovation, and we're able to conceive of it, but now what we need to do is create the movement in this country that asks for our leaders to do this thing. I just close quickly by saying this to you. 1970, when I first came back from Vietnam, the first thing I did was actually become involved in Earth Day, 1970. You know what we did? We brought 20 million Americans out of their homes on the same day, April 22nd, all across the country, demonstrating against living next to a toxic waste site or a dump or a city, living in a city where you couldn't see from one end of the city to the other, quality of air, what Arnold was talking about, and John, pollution. And we targeted the 12 worst votes in the United States Congress with those 20 million citizens. We labeled those 12 the dirty dozen. And guess what? In the next election, 7 of the 12 were defeated. You know what happened? The then President of the United States, Richard Nixon, put 1,000 words in his State of the Union message about the environment, about how we needed to do something. And Congress immediately passed Clean Air Act, Safe Drinking Water, Marine Mammal Protection, Coastal Zone Management, Endangered Species, and we created the Environmental Protection Agency of the United States of America. You know why that happened? Accountability. Accountability. So that is exactly what World War Zero is about. Getting accountability back into the system, building this army of people who are prepared to talk to neighbors, to do everything possible to make this a voting issue as it was in 1970. If we do that, folks, we are going to beat the climate crisis. We're going to win the future in an extraordinary way. And it's going to come about by revitalizing our own democracy. It really is that simple.
It's a pretty sophisticated group here, but one thing that John mentioned is this whole battery technology. He suggested we give $1 billion to somebody that could create a really effective battery, because see, what that does for all of us folks is it creates what's called distributed power. So now all of a sudden, the wind that blows or the sun that shines, this can be captured. And we become our own utility company in our homes. And we begin to regulate what happens in our homes, how much power we use. It's a big game changer. It's a big game changer for the entire economy, because it absolutely will affect so many of these utility companies. And what does their role become? But it's really, really exciting to think about the development of battery technology, and that's going to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen soon, and it's going to change a lot of things in this country. And I'll bet one of those great scientists will come out of Otterbein.
Hi, first I want to apologize for my shirt. I just came from the Arnold Classic in Columbus.
I think it's a cool shirt.
Yes, sir. You are number one. My question for you, mostly Governor Schwarzenegger, with all you've done in California, with the environment and all the innovations you've made, why do you think Washington's been so hard-headed about the issue, especially with all the evidence that you have? And I lived under your administration there too, so.
Well, you know, there's a long answer to that, but one of the things is definitely that has to do with that the parties benefit from fighting each other. And that's how they go and raise money, and this is how everything is happening. And what we have to do, and I think what we are all talking about here, is let's unite. Right. Let's not fall for that trap, because otherwise nothing gets done. And as I said earlier, if it has to do with immigration, if it has to do with environmental issues, infrastructure issues, healthcare issues, I mean, there's so many issues that are so important to this country. My job and my responsibility has been for the last 30 years to give something back to America. That's why I ran for governor in the first place, and that's why I got involved in Special Olympics and after-school programs and the President's Council on Fitness and this environmental crusade and all those things, because I feel like I came over here as an immigrant because this was the land of opportunity and the greatest country in the world. And everything that I've accomplished is because of America. America is without any doubt the greatest country in the world, and still the land of opportunity with all of those problems, because every country has its problems. But we have to go and make sure that we all work together to solve those problems, because we can't continue on just talking about it and not doing it. And this is why we want to have those forums, and we want to have those kind of town hall meetings to rally up the people and to tell the people, get involved, join this crusade, and go and call your local politicians and your politicians that represent you in Washington, and force them and tell them and threaten them that you're going to do everything that you can to go and take them out of office if they don't perform. So this is, I think, the number one thing that we have to do is Get involved as much as you can, and let's create a crusade, an environmental crusade.
Thank you.
Okay,
And
absolutely.
one more thing. You're my hero. Thank you for everything you've ever done. You're the greatest of all time. That's all I want to say.
Thank you.
I have a small question. If other companies, why aren't they stopping, why won't they stop using those fossil fuels that, like, why aren't they stopping the use of fossil fuels and starting to use, I don't know, nuclear power, because the waste doesn't add carbon dioxide into the atmosphere? And I'm really not sure, like, why they want to keep releasing carbon dioxide.
I think it's a very, very good. I just want to tell you right off the top, when I was your age, I would have been so scared to do what you just did. I mean, you really have a lot of guts. You are the true leader. So I think that all of us have an answer here, I'm sure of that, but I just tell you, one of the things is because the status quo is just very powerful. So, you know, whatever is going on right now, using fossil fuels and using oil and using, you know, coal and all of those things, you know, it's just very hard for those industries to switch over. But the other thing is that our subsidies, you see, we are all kind of like making our moves, and you change kind of people's behavior through taxes or through subsidies. So as long as we as a government and as a country subsidize fossil fuels, much more so than green energy, you will have them go in that direction. If we just, worldwide, there's $370 billion of subsidies given out for the fossil fuel companies and oil companies. And I think that is to stop. We slowly have to move every year 10%, $37 billion, let's say, to go and to add to incentives for green energy, for solar projects, and for cars, to build electric cars and hydrogen cars and stuff like that. If we would do that, you will see a drastic change immediately. So we have to really let our politicians know that we got to stop the subsidies to the fossil fuel companies, and that would then slowly change the behavior, and we will get off fossil fuels.
Yep, young man. Hey, kiddo, young man. We're gonna, before you leave, you're gonna come on up here and shake the Terminator's hand. I know you want to do that, but they'll help you. Okay.
Good job, buddy. Good job, man. Really nice to meet you. Thank you very much for that question. It's fantastic.
Let me, while he's making his way down here, well, he doesn't have time for me. Here's the thing that, hey, kiddo, hey, young man, listen to this for a second, because I think people need to hear this. There's a new movement going on in business today where businesses are more concerned about the way they treat their employees. They're very concerned about whether they're training their employees to improve their lives. And they're also very concerned about the environment. It's happening. And many companies today are going green, and they're figuring out a way to do it. And even some of the banks are saying, we're not going to be involved in things. In fact, I know that Chase just came out and said, we're not going to fund this development of these coal plants anymore. So young man, I want you to know that the business community, in many respects, not all the industries, but the business community is worried about you and your future. And by the way, before you blink your eye, for we blink our eyes, you will be grown and you will have children. And that's why we're here, because we care not just about you, but we also care about the children you're going to have, which is impossible for you to think about right now. But I want to tell you that there are businesses now that are really doing a nice job. And you know what would be really great? Is when you go to school and you find one of those businesses and you get your classmates to send them a letter and say, thanks for thinking about us. Okay? Take that on. All right.
We're running out of time. So we're going to take a last question, and if they answer quickly, maybe another one, but let's see.
Can I ask a favor of all of you? If you don't get to ask a question, we want to answer your questions through World War Zero on the website, worldwarzero.com. And if you come into the website, we'll make sure we get back to you and give you answers. So I apologize for that.
I'm honored to be here and honored to ask you all this question. Aside with, I don't know if there's going to be an answer to this, but aside with helping people find a better understanding of how to help with the climate change and helping the environment, do you three gentlemen, as governors and representatives of not only each state but the whole community that you come from, do you believe it'll help the community come together regardless of where each individual comes from and whether they're mentally or physically disabled or their origins? Do you think it'll help them make a better bond with their community?
There's nothing like a common cause to bring people together. It always has. In our country particularly, that's who we are. That's where we come from. We come from the common cause of fighting the British and fighting for independence and fighting for our values through World War I, World War II, putting the UN together. Everything we did, I think, is driven globally by that. Now we have the greatest reason we've ever had, folks, to come together. And we won't get it done if we don't come together, because there's a shared responsibility between nations in achieving this. So I think it actually could be something that unites the world and diffuses tensions in places where we're currently heading towards conflict. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, there are 2 billion people 15 years old to 25 in the world. And there's 1.8 billion children 15 years old and younger. And many of them live in parts of the world where they already, 400 million of them won't ever go to school. There are places of abject poverty still. There are 1 billion people who don't have electricity still. So you talk about a task that would unite the world and bring people together in common cause. This is it. No question whatsoever.
Sir, I don't know whether you know this or not, but Greta has Asperger's. And believe it or not, online, people actually attacked her and put her down, which was an outrage, okay? You see, Greta said she was so glad that she had Asperger's because it allowed her to look at things much differently than everybody else. And, you know, what you're really raising is a fundamental question. We're all equal in the eyes of the Lord, regardless of who we are. And by the way, when it comes to the faith community, when I go back and I read a little bit of Genesis and I think about that garden where Adam and Eve were put in charge of taking care of it, not polluting it, but taking care of it, of saying that, you know, you're here to manage it. You're here to name the animals. It's such an exciting thing. It's such a fun thing to think about. The faith community of all faiths need to rally behind this, because while we should not worship the environment, we have no right to destroy what God gave us. Okay? And thank you for your question.
We'll have to keep our answer very short on this. This is the last one, and then we'll have their final remarks.
Thank you very much. I'm one of those on-the-ground activists here in Ohio, and I've been working with people all over Ohio to protect our water, our air, our soil, particularly around the fracking issue. And fracking has been ramped up over the past 10 years, and there's a huge petrochemical hub in Belmont County where all these fracked gas pipelines are going to make plastic. And the PTT Global cracker plant is owned by a Thai company and a Korean company. And I'm here to hold my politicians accountable, because during Governor Kasich's run, he ramped up the fracking, and his Jobs Ohio funded all of the infrastructure. And people that are on the ground know this. And I just think that I believe in redemption, Governor Kasich, but I do feel you owe the Ohioans a flip. If you're flipping to protecting the environment rather than protecting business and creating fracking and all the toxic frack waste. The question is, are you going to own up to your record as governor and polluting so much water, air, and soil?
Yeah, I'm glad that's directed at me so I can answer. But no, the answer is I'm really pleased that we were able to do fracking. And we were very, very careful about the way we did it. And when we ran into any problems, we shut people down. And as I said, we were able to get ourselves in a position where we put rules on methane that were more strict than any other state in the country. And we're very proud of that. In terms of water, we are the ones that led the fight to try to save Lake Erie from algae blooms by coming up with water management and soil management plans and programs. We didn't get it all through. We got some through. We saved Grand Lake St. Mary's. And I believe this is a giant issue. I think farmers have been frightened, and it's not been right, but I think farmers do want to be environmentalists. They can manage their land, and it has to do with a nutrient management plan that'll work. And we've seen the results at Grand Lake St. Mary's, and we've seen some improvements in Lake Erie. But I don't apologize for fracking.
Do you still think fracking is good for the climate?
Let me tell you this.
Do you think the methane is good for the climate?
Excuse me, ma'am.
Hold on.
No, I'm an activist. I'm doing what you asked us to do and hold you accountable.
Let's be respectful. You did.
I am respectful.
You did.
Can I? No, she's Erika.
You did. But
please.
let us answer the question, because
He answered.
we need to.
Erika,
Thank you.
but ma'am, let me just say, first of all, thank you for standing up. Thank you for coming here to do exactly the kind of thing we're trying to do.
What you're asking.
All of us in public life have to answer for all the choices that we make, number one. Number two, when I called John and we talked about this, John was very upfront with me. He said, look, I have a view about fracking that is different from some people. And I said, John, World War Zero is not going to pick and choose on every single issue. There's no litmus test for your concern for the environment. I have a different view from him on fracking. We talked about it. But you know what? I am damn glad he is here as part of this coalition to get a conversation in this country. And this
Nevertheless, he needs to be held accountable.
But here's the deal. If we don't vote for people who accept the challenge of climate change, and they're all ready to come to the table in a reasonable way to work this through, we'll work this through.
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that, but I'm not fine with greenwashing.
No, look, I understand that. I'm as impatient as you are to get over some of the hurdles here. And I think Arnold hit the nail on the head. Why are we not moving faster? Why are we sort of stuck?
We have 12 years.
Well, and you're right, and that's exactly the framework that I put it in at the beginning of this conversation. But the question is, how are we going to break through the old habits and the easy things? Subsidies. Why, in God's name, in this day and age, do we have subsidies for fossil fuel when everybody knows we've got to wean ourselves off of it over a period of time? The subsidies should be for alternative and renewable and sustainable energy, not for fossil fuel.
I agree.
So how?
But Ohio has become a frack center.
But
Ohio has become a fracking center.
But here's my point, and I'll close on it.
That's what I mean by
Folks, we're not going to have everybody in the same place on every issue with respect to the environment. But what's critical is the environment is issue number one. We're going to vote it. We're going to have people who want to hold it accountable. And guess what? we can get back to the United States Senate that I was originally part of, where we actually worked together across the aisle, where we balanced the budget of our nation during the 1990s, where we made decisions and we had to compromise to get there. That's the nature of a democracy.
And you still need people who can speak truth to power.
Absolutely.
You better believe it. Thank you.
You know what?
We're never going to get ahead by looking in the rearview mirror.
Amen. That's proof positive that there's signs of life in this conversation and that we should be having it. And I'm very happy that you're all here, and thank you so much for your comment. And I just want to get the final remarks from our guests here today, please.
Well, you want me to start?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Since I just come from the Arnold Sports and Fitness Festival, I do a little analogy about that. 40, 50 years ago, well, actually it was 50 years ago when I came over to America, and when we talked then about bodybuilding and weightlifting, everyone was kind of against it. And even the medical community said, this is terrible, it's going to cause heart attacks, and it's going to make you muscle-bound, and no athlete should pick up weights or anything like that. And we started going and doing seminars around the country and around the world. We started writing books. We came out with the movie Pumping Iron, and we did all kinds of work and had town hall meetings like that and talked about health and fitness and the importance of weight training. At that time, they all said, you know, if you're a bodybuilder, you become a narcissist if you do bodybuilding, and you probably turn gay, and all this kind of stuff we were accused of. Well, it took 40 years. Look at what happened today. Look at the world today. There's not one single hotel that does not have a health club where you lift weights. We have weight machines and cardiovascular machines and all that. Bodybuilding is one of the fastest growing activities in the world, and every military base has the hugest weight rooms, every police station, every fire station, every university, every high school, and every single athlete is lifting weights and is doing resistance training. Even in physical therapy, and now the doctors are writing about it, says, you got to do some exercise in the gym, you got to go and lift some weights. This is how things have changed, because we talked about it over and over and over, and it was the people, not the government, it was the people that decided they should go out and work out and take care of their bodies. Because they were sick and tired of always hearing about that 71% of our young kids don't even make it to the military if they want to go to the military because they're not physically able to, because they're in such bad shape. So this is the same thing, and the reason I'm telling you this is it took 40 years. It took a long time to talk and to talk and talk, but all of a sudden the movement took off. And now the Ohio, the Arnold Sports and Fitness Festival, we had 250,000 people coming together. It's the biggest event of the state. So this is what happened. Those are the changes that happened. And I see the same thing happening here. That's why I don't give up. I'm an optimist. I think the key thing is if we all work together, and if we communicate the right way, and if we are inclusive and don't attack each other, I think that we can do it. I see a bright future ahead. So,
yes, ma'am.
I'm going to build on what Arnold said from a slightly different angle. The discussion we just had is exactly what we need to be doing, and I'm really thrilled that we had somebody who stood up to challenge, because that's what we have to do. Winston Churchill famously said that democracy is the worst form of government there is, except for everything else. That's where we are, folks. You know, Ben Franklin walked out of the Constitution Hall and a woman shouted at him, what do we have after they finished writing the Constitution, a monarchy or a republic? And he said, a republic, if you can keep it. Those words of warning are precisely where we are today. And this issue is the biggest opportunity we've had to revitalize our democracy at the grassroots level. We have too much money in American politics, too much greed, too much corporate power that's partly kept us from being able to make some of these choices, because as Arnold said, the status quo is easy. Every great movement in our nation's history has had young people at the forefront. Young people at the forefront. Civil rights, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, the women's movement, the environment movement, the peace movement, all of these efforts were young people with idealism and vision holding the other folks accountable. And my friends, that's the way this is going to happen. It's that we still have the power of being American citizens who have the right to go out, get up and say anything we want about our government, about what's happening, run for office, don't run, support somebody, but be engaged. 55.6% doesn't cut it. You can win back the future this coming November and in the months ahead if you will work at this effort and do what free people have the right to do, which is organize around the issue of life and death. And so help me God, if you do that, if we prove that we're willing to vote as much as people in other countries where I've been an election observer and I've seen people stand for 20 hours in a line in the hot sun with machine guns and tanks around them and the threat of being killed and blown up by a bomb, and they just want that purple ink on their thumb that says, I voted. I went up to one guy in Sudan. I apologized to him. He had to wait 5 hours, and he said, Senator, I've waited 50 years for this. I'll wait another few hours. That's what we need to do.
John and I were backstage getting ready to come out here, and he said, you know, experience really matters. And I said, yeah, John, and I said, you know, we've all been through the wars. Arnold, being governor for 8 years in California, even to get to the point where he had to create a tent so he could go out and smoke and figure out how to bring the legislators in to talk. John, who has been in so many negotiations, whether it's the Iran nuclear accord, the Paris Accords, and who knows what other accords, he's done so much. And I've been around public life for 30 years and have been involved in, believe it or not, balancing the federal budget and having to listen to other people, being involved in working, on welfare reform, so many things there, and then as governor, having to bring people together on things like what we do about police and community violence. And there's one thing that I've learned through all of this, and that is you have to convene. You have to bring people in of all types, but they have to be motivated by the fact that they're for the common good. And you can take people of very diverse opinions. For example, in the area of gun violence, community activists, law enforcement, all came together with a most comprehensive plan in America for how we deal with this problem. And you know how we did it? Because you get people together, you put them at a table, you get rid of all the political considerations and the self-interest and say, we have a moment in time to help others. And when you do that, it is amazing what can happen. So yeah, we have to march and there has to be the vanguard, but at the end of the day, as a family of Americans, we sit down and say, this is a priority for us. And we expect our leaders to understand the roadmap and to do it. It has been echoed over and over again about all of you. Nothing good is ever lost. Everything that you do to advance this issue will be remembered by somebody. And that young man standing up, I guarantee you that John Kerry did it as a young man, and I know Arnold did, and I did as a kid. And my father came home one day after I spoke at a school board meeting at the age of about 15, and he said, Johnny, what the heck did you do last night? It's all about us doing what we can to make a difference on this issue, on gun violence, on health care. We matter, folks. And I want to thank John for letting Otterbein be part of this. And I want to thank you, my neighbors, for being part of this and coming here and having such a tremendous turnout and honoring these two gentlemen, John Kerry and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you for all you joining us here today. And if you haven't already, you can sign up at www.worldwarzero.com to enlist and find tools and resources that you can share with your friends. Thank you, World War Z. Peace out. Well done, yes, sir.